Up and live? Yeah, so we are live and welcome to this second half of From Young to Wise, a joint collaboration between the Holland Dance Festival and Dance and Creative Wellness Foundation. We're delighted to welcome all of our wonderful guests online, and I know that some of you are deep in the early morning in Australia, while other people are joining us from the later early morning in the United States. And here in the center of wonderful The Hague, the Spouw Theatre, it's our pleasure to welcome our first guest. That's an esteemed colleague of mine, Claire Gus-West. And I know that she's going to be speaking about some of the literature and some of the practice that we can do involved in aging. Intergenerational dance projects, thank you. So, Claire, if I could ask you to join us, please.
Thank you. I just need a microphone.
And here we have a microphone. Take your time, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, so the subject now for this, now that we've got our online audience with us as well, our subject is going into the benefits of intergenerational work. What can different generations actually take from dancing together? And my job is just to say what evidence there is so far, what research is there about this work that many of us are embarking on. And I'd like to start with a very short film, indeed, of a research project in Australia who are looking at exactly this kind of thing. And I think from the film, you can see the instant change in the seniors, even though the researchers are measuring their strength and other benefits, things that changed. It's actually a television series now in Australia.
What's your name?
Taiwan.
KY.
No, Taiwan.
I would expect that we could see some benefits on mood, on mobility, and on a general assessment of someone's health.
Squeeze it as tight as you can. Go, 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 squeeze, squeeze, squeeze.
So they're testing actual changes in physical
I have depression feelings from time to time, very low at times. You got a grandma?
She's not as old as you.
I would love to see the older generation improve in their mobility and balance. Just by having children around, people will feel the need to participate and be up and about.
I don't walk anywhere without the walker. Here's how you do it.
There'll be great benefits for both of us.
Have afternoon tea. A joyful existence in old age is attainable.
I thought I'm not good with little people, but I'm enjoying every bit of it.
Okay, so I cut it a little bit short, but I think we can see immediately, like there was one gentleman there who said, I don't do anything without my walker. And then the next thing he was, I'll show you how you do it, and straight up. So that's a very interesting television series, if anybody would like to have a look at that. But that really encapsulates that it's instant. And someone else mentioned, or several people have mentioned today, that we're in the present moment. And that works in English because we can say the present is the present moment, the gift is the present moment. And that's really the main thing that the young and older have to offer each other, is this present moment. I'm not going to ask us to read all of that, but our definition, or one of the definitions of the nature of an intergenerational project, is to look at what both generations or all generations have to offer each other, not just one way or potentially one way. So what can we know from the research? Well, we've got some incredible changes happening in our society, as we all know, from climate to migration to technological changes. And those are forcing us to find new innovative ways to address some of these challenges. And I call it investing in resilience. The kind of things that intergenerational arts are evidenced to bring us is obviously a breakdown in the stereotypes of the different generations of their ways of thinking, but definite evidence of improved mental, physical, and social health for all. And that includes staff and members of family and staff members. An understanding for the older generation of the modern culture, but also the opposite, of course, the sharing of life skills and knowledge. So these are all the evidenced research, although it's probably your direct experience, all of you that work directly in this area. And it allows as well the younger generation to perhaps even have an interest to wish to develop a career working with the older generation. So it gives them an exposure and a responsibility, a social responsibility. Now, there's a real bias in the research that I took a look at, which is the bias is usually what's the benefit for the older generation in dancing with the younger generations. Whereas as Eldridge and the foundation, our own angle is what can the older generation, as an incredible resource and example of resilience, bring to our younger dancers. So one of the first things that we know is that well-being increases with age, emotional well-being, and that we're much more able to emotionally regulate as we get older. We have less regrets, and therefore we predict outcomes better. So those are all like skills that we have, and I put that equals wise. Then we also, in fact, use our brain more economically. So left and right hemispheres actually communicate better with each other. When we're younger, we tend to have an emotional response from one hemisphere, and then we can have a really logic response from another hemisphere, and we tend to be jumping between the two. So what happens, this is an incredibly positive aspect of aging, is that the brain begins to communicate across. And why would that be interesting? Oops, I didn't move forward for you. The reason that that would be interesting, this integration, is that we make less mistakes. We make less life mistakes. So those are all really strong and positive resources that are coming from, for the younger populations, dancing or working in creative ways with the older populations. And I tried to look in a nutshell at Intergenerational Dance Project. And I'm very happy to say, Eldridge, that the outcome of the research is exactly as we were hoping it would be, which is you have the physical resilience and strength of the young, promoting that in our elderly group, so they are getting fitness and physical ability and renewed physical motor skills, and the young are equally picking up in that lovely virtuous circle well-being, confidence, and self-esteem. In the evidence research programs here, we're seeing that through dancing with older adults. So nearly finished. That's much too small to read the next thing, but it's just a model of intergenerational engagement. So people were wanting to get involved because of their curiosity and to make new relationships. Then they had all of the outcomes that we'd mentioned so far: breaking stereotypes, companionship, becoming open to new things, and physical benefits. And the only challenges of engaging was a little bit of exposure, feeling a bit vulnerable, and a bit of a fear of performing. But otherwise, all the other outcomes were positive outcomes for both generations. So that was in a very short space of time. Interesting that the research is completely confirming what many of us are experiencing. We'll be hearing from New York, Sarah Marcus and the Mark Morris Dance Group in a moment, and we're hearing from Helen Lindsell again in just a second. So those are people who are really working extensively with intergenerational projects. So that's all from me on that one for the moment.
Actually, Claire, before you race
Wrap
off,
up.
yeah, we were talking about resilience and how older people tend to be more mentally resilient, and how that translates itself into the fact that they're able to regulate and they take rest. And those things are primarily because they've got into the routine and the rhythm of that. And I think if we look at something like Corona, rhythm and routine has been broken. So I think it's very important that we reestablish those routines and rhythms. And another word that we've mentioned is rituals, things that we tend to do repetitively because it just happens to be the right time. And through that, we can actually re-establish or help younger people to create those things. Is there anything in the literature that relates to that at all?
Well, there's literature around rhythm. So that's although rhythm, we might think of that as our dancing rhythm, but rhythm goes from microsecond rhythm of synaptic connection and in the brain, right the way through to our dancing rhythms, and then to our eating, sleeping, circadian rhythms, and all of those should and are in harmony, and that's one of the things that we're mostly promoting through dance. So yes, there's research around the importance of rhythm for our health is definitely, especially regular rhythm, so like the waltz or something like that. So nice, soothing, regular rhythm changes the other functions within the body, like the immune system, so that it's soothing and calming. So yes, definitely.
Fantastic,
Rhythm.
Thank you. Rhythm and dance. Before we go on to our section with Helen, I'd just like to thank you for taking the time to look this all up. And I'd like to just propose that if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We'll be having a panel discussion at the end of this talk, and then we'll be able to answer some of those questions. Claire, would you please introduce Helen?
So it's my most great pleasure that we have with us Helen Lindsell, who's Artistic and Executive Director of Dance United Yorkshire in the United Kingdom, who do some very incredible and special work with intergenerational, well, all projects are intergenerational, I think. I'm going to give you the pointer for your backwards and forwards. And we're just going to share the sofas, we thought, to do this. So, Helen, I'm going to let you take it away and just introduce a little bit, it'll be up there, introduce a little bit Dance United Yorkshire to us and some of the larger planning that you have to do to get these projects off the ground.
Okay, so hello everybody. Joining the microphone. Hello everybody. It's really lovely to be here and to have been invited to talk about our intergenerational work. So just to give you a little bit of context about Dance United Yorkshire, we are a Bradford-based charity. Bradford is a city in the north of England in Yorkshire, and we specialise in dance and social inclusion. We deliver contemporary dance and performance projects to children, young people, adults and communities, focusing on bringing people together and tackling some health and social injustice. I'm here obviously to talk about the intergenerational strand of our work, which has been, we've been doing intergenerational work since about 2016. We've been around since 2011, but we've been doing intergenerational work for a while now. I thought I would start and just showing you some images of some of the projects we've done over the years. So let's hope that I can fathom this. Oh, da-da. So one of the first projects we did was back in 2016-17 called Doodles and Daydreams, which brought together 65 dancers from the age of 4 to about 84. And The project was inspired by a David Hockney picture, who is famous for drawing Yorkshire scenes. And the title and the theme was What's at the End of the Road? So we had different groups from across Bradford performing together in a 30-minute piece of dance in professional theatre. And we did this twice. So we reached 130 people over the space of doing Doodles and Daydreams. In 2019, we did a project called The Flood, which was inspired by the refugee crisis, and we actually worked with a refugee organisation and refugee families. This was a smaller group, but still about 35, 40 dancers, ranging from about 7 or 8 years old up to people in their 80s. And you can see here on the left a refugee family, a mother and her 2 daughters who shared their story as part of the piece. And then during COVID, we were faced with the challenge of doing an intergenerational project when we couldn't bring people together. So we created an intergenerational film, which is where we did a lot of learning about what the different generations actually learn from each other. And the piece was narrated by a group of elders, and all our different groups of children and young people responded to their stories about growing up in Homewood, which is a particularly deprived community in Bradford. So I'm just going to show you a couple of little film clips. So the first, this is a group of young people who are responding to the elders reflecting on their teenage years. I think what was interesting is not just listening to the elders talking about their childhood and their upbringing, but actually the elders remembering the challenge of being a teenager and remembering actually how difficult adolescence is. So then our group of adolescents responded to those stories and those memories. During the creation of Out of the Woods, the groups never actually met each other. But the film, which ended up featuring 50 dancers, being about 15 minutes long, was then launched, and it was the launch of the film that brought the dancers together.
You become a teenager, you're becoming a bit more independent and learning to do things by yourself.
I think a lot of teenagers were rebellious, weren't they?
The hardest thing about being a teenager, I think, is the unknown, not knowing what's around the corner.
Hopefully you can follow that text. There's quite broad Yorkshire accents in there. And then we moved to a couple of the elders who narrated the film.
Many people have formed friendships in Homewood, and to me that is what community is all about.
A community, somebody you could talk to, the elders as well, and you learn things from the elderly.
I think a very poignant point there made by Irma. You learn things from the elderly. And then most recently, we revived Doodles and Daydreams with 77 dancers and an audience of 600 people in one of the most prestigious theatres in Bradford. And we worked with a local poet.
So I don't know if I have a microphone. D. I'm on microphone D. Thank you. I just wanted to ask you then, those sound like massive numbers to all of us, especially as we're thinking of working with people from age 4 right through the generations. Tell us a little bit about what kind of planning and things goes into something like that.
Well, obviously you have to start any of these projects with a budget, so knowing how much money you have to play with, and that can determine where you perform, how many people are involved, etc. So you start from the performance date a lot of the time. Where are we performing? When are we performing? You work backwards. You think about how long you've got to bring those groups together. You create a creation and rehearsal schedule. Then you have to think about who is in the performance. So which groups are you working with? Where are you working? Why are you working? So what is the purpose of this project? What are we hoping to achieve? There's a lot to do with staffing. So there's artists, there's additional artists, there's freelance staff. And I'm not sure how it works in different parts of the world, but we have what we call chaperones in the UK. So for anyone under 16, they have to be looked after by people during rehearsals and performances. And it's a legal requirement, and that in itself can create quite a big headache. So we have to consider all those aspects. And I think when we look at the rehearsals which involve the entire company, so you're looking at 77 people in one space with all the staff, you have to think about managing all the different needs, what happens to the over 16s, under 16s, over 18s, where are their changing rooms, where are the entrances and exits, how do you keep a 4-year-old engaged for the entire day, how do you keep a 74-year-old engaged for the whole day, and you have to think about all the things that are surrounding the actual choreography.
Amazing. How do you do that? That's what we're wanting you to share with us. There's been some keywords came up earlier in the day here with things like respect between the cultures, things like creating a safe space perhaps for different cultural groups as well as, sorry, I said cultures earlier, I meant generations. And yes, is it scripted? How do you manage that?
I think the way that Dance United works is to create safe spaces. So the majority of our participants are non-dancers coming from very challenging backgrounds. We work with young people, children, families who are living on the margins of society. A lot of them are coming from deprivation, lots of mental health needs, experience of trauma. So we have all of that to take into account anyway with all of our work. So it's very important that we create trust with all of our groups. So when we work individually with groups, it's about getting to know them as individuals, codes of conduct where we agree how we're going to work in a group, and developing relationships with them and their families. So we do a lot of pastoral support. We support them and their families outside of the dance. So that's embedded within our work anyway. So when we work with the bigger groups, we do the same when everyone's in the space. We agree a way of working, and we find ways that the groups can meet through games and through tasks that bring everybody together. We give responsibility to maybe the teenagers and the older dancers to look after the smaller children. So each 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old will have a teenager or an older or a young adult to look after them. So those relationships are gradually formed as we go along. And I think there's a lot of behaviour changes actually, because the teenagers that might usually be a little bit disruptive have suddenly got to look after a 4-year-old, and that's quite different. And an adult who might usually use inappropriate language or go out for a cigarette whenever they feel might have to consider what language they're using when they're around young people and children. So we work with very challenging behaviours, and actually intergenerational work can really improve their behaviours quite in quite a beautiful way.
But can you give us just maybe an example of, you said you establish codes of conduct. That sounds easy, but knowing teenagers, that's not necessarily imposing a code of conduct. Just tell us what that might be in practical terms.
I think it's about working with a group to agree a way of working. So at the beginning of a process, we will have a discussion that we hope is meaningful in how are we going to get to the end product. And it's very important that we place equal value on the process and the product. We work to very high artistic standards, but we have to ensure that the process is meaningful and hopefully life transforming. So we ask the group to share and tell each other and tell us how are we going to get all of you on a stage at St George's Hall in front of 600 people. We have 10 weeks to do it. you're only meeting once a week and maybe twice on a Saturday. How are we going to get there, and how is this going to be a beautiful journey for all of us? And they will often give you the answers, but it's also about unpicking some of those things. I think young people are very good at saying, oh, it's about respect. And what exactly does that mean? Young people know what to say, but do they know what it means? So we do a lot of work with creating trust, creating communities, creating safe spaces, and then we take that onto a larger scale when we work with intergenerational casts.
All right, I think another question, we're a lot of teaching artists today. What sort of barriers do you encounter? What kind of things are barriers or challenges that you're maybe dealing with that we've not thought of?
I think for a lot of the people that we work with, there is a lot of low self-esteem. A lot of our children, young people and adults are suffering with poor mental health. So you have to make those spaces emotionally, psychologically safe. We do naturally meet a lot of children, young people who have different learning needs and might be overwhelmed in spaces where there are suddenly 70 people and they're only used to 15. So what we do is we have a good pastoral team. So if children, young people or adults are having other issues within the space, there is a team surrounding the dance team. So there were 3 or 4 of us working artistically on Doodles and Daydreams, but there were also 5 or 6 people on the outside of the studio to manage any of those additional needs. So that's one of the barriers. I talked about behaviour. We can have some quite challenging behaviours. So that's why it's very important in our planning to think about, for example, young people who want to go out and smoke, who aren't really allowed to smoke. If they see a 19-year-old going out for a cigarette, that's actually going to cause us quite a lot of problems, even though it might seem like a small thing. So we have to kind of think about all the dramas that are going to happen before they've happened. And the other things are to do with managing those ages and changing spaces and making sure you haven't got adults changing with children, just those kinds of basic things that you might actually not think about.
Helen could write us the kind of checklist, right, of all the things you might have needed to think about. And also, something that many of us are addressing as well is working with different cultures who have different traditions and different ways of working. I think you shared with me in our pre-chat where you actually had to cancel a performance because of just not being allowed.
Well, in our original Doodles and Daydreams planning, Bradford has actually got a high percentage of Asian Muslim communities. And in our original plan, we had hoped to reach into the community a little bit further, and we worked with a group of Asian women, and they worked with us right up until 3 weeks before the performance, planning their costumes, developing the choreography, and then they said, oh no, we won't be performing because we're not allowed. So that sent me into a slight panic, considering I had 3 weeks and a whole section of movement that had been developed. So we managed to find an alternative group of women, and we kept the movement content. But we do face those barriers where the element of performance is not conducive to certain cultures and religions. So that is quite familiar to us in Bradford, working with those communities. But I think we find ways to do outreach work, engage these communities in different ways that don't involve performance, and then find ways to embed those creative aspects that we might have done with those communities into other sections of the choreography. And of course, they're invited to the performances, which are always free, by the way.
My goodness.
Always free.
Yeah. Did you, the project that you did during COVID, I thought that was really beautiful. I just wondered, just as a creative idea, I'm not sure if it was exactly clear for our audience but can you tell us just what you asked the older generation to write, and then how were the younger generation inspired by that choreography when they couldn't meet?
Yes, so we asked our group of elders who we were working with at the time to tell us their stories of living in this particular community in Bradford called Homewood. And this particular community is very excluded from the main city centre. So you don't go to Homewood unless you live there or you work there. It has very negative press. There's a very high level of crime, drugs, gangs. It's lot of negative press, so there's a presumption that everyone in Homewood is a really awful person and everything is really terrible. So we spoke to a group of elders and asked us to tell us their stories of growing up in Homewood. And actually what came out of it was really quite beautiful. They talked about beautiful childhood memories, growing up into work, different work. People presume that no one in Homewood works. So they talked about different things they'd done for work. They talked about the importance of family and community and friendship. And we thought that the narrative might be really exciting and dramatic and take all these twists and turns, but really it was quite simple. And each of our groups just explored one of those themes. So we had play, we had transition, we had family, and then we explored those themes with each individual group. And as I said, they didn't really meet until the film was created and launched. But that in itself was a really, really amazing evening where they all kind of went, oh, I recognise you, and meeting in real life. But it was a really lovely way to make them feel like they were still part of something during a time where everyone felt really disconnected.
Absolutely. Where was I going to go to next? Yeah, the important thing, of course, my theme all the time is evidencing what we do. So it's one thing to do what we do and another thing to actually try to collect data, which becomes really necessary tools for us, right, as we want to continue the work or multiply the work. So this is one of the things that Helen has been doing as well, is systematically making sure that data is collected. Do you want to share some things with us that you've found the benefits of the intergenerational work?
Yes, so this was from Doodles and Daydreams, and they're just a couple of statistics looking at the participants' experience. So obviously you can see a huge amount of people whose expectations were exceeded by taking part in the project. About 90% of people rating the experience as excellent. And then talking about the benefits, so mental health, meeting new people, increased sense of well-being, learning something new, developing skills, inspiring people to develop their creative practice. But I think my favourite way of creating this is the audience feedback. Obviously, nearly 100% of the audience talking about their enjoyment, relevance, distinctiveness, their enthusiasm, how well it was presented. But my favourite aspect is always the qualitative aspect of evaluation. And I think from some of these quotes, I'll just read a couple of...
I was going to say, can you read some of them out? Because especially online, they can only see quite a small...
So things like, I loved everything about the project. I loved meeting new people of all ages, especially the little kids. It gave us a chance to learn about other people's journeys into dance. A really beautiful and warm feeling being surrounded by such a mix of ages, all united and sharing space. An intergenerational cast felt very human and emotive, both on and off stage. So just some really amazing quotes. It was a truly special and magical project. Everyone pulled together. And this is one of my favourite quotes. I liked dancing with the older boys. One of them lifted me above his head. He was so strong. When I watched him dance, he was really good. And when I danced with him, I felt like I might be that good someday. Doodles and Daydreams was my first time on stage. It was the best experience ever. I hoped the younger ones could look up to me. Working with different groups helped us see our journeys as dancers from young to old. I would do it again in a heartbeat. Oh, it's making me feel quite emotional.
Beautiful. And obviously, a beautiful feedback, but how do you use that then? I mean, how do we use evidence and, having quantified the impact? So, what are you doing with that collected evidence?
Well, I think at the moment, as an organisation, we are trying to continuously prove our worth to funders, particularly our Arts Council of England, and argue the case for funding us more, essentially, to do more of this work and to realise the benefits and value of all the different projects we do. So we are trying to currently position ourselves with the Arts Council to ask for more money. Yeah, in a nutshell. So gathering all of this data is really helpful, both the statistics and the numbers, which a lot of people find clearer, but also these personal stories of really what they gained from it. And we're funded by a lot of different trusts and foundations. And the project that Doodles and Daydreams was part of was a 4-year programme, and that was funded by the Paul Hamlin Foundation. That funding has actually finished, and we need more funding. So we are currently reapplying to the Paul Hamlin Foundation, hoping that they will love the evidence so much that they will absolutely give us more money for many more years. But this involves quite a lot of work, as many people know, in terms of funding. We have to write for hours and kind of prove our worth. So all of this helps us do that.
Exactly. Okay.
I think it's a whole conversation that we probably haven't got time for yet.
That was just for our online people. That was a question about what about health insurance. But most of the countries in Europe, we haven't quite got round to funding this kind of work through health insurance just as yet.
No.
Let me I'm slowly closing us up. But do you find that you'd agreed then with what I found in the research, that the younger people were finding some kind of self-worth or self-esteem and confidence through that? Could you just, even just if it's just qualitative feedback, give us some of your thoughts about what the young were taking from working with the older?
I think when I first did the intergenerational project in 2016-17 and thought 65 people are coming together, it's not going to work. It is going to be absolute madness. I remember just watching the relationships forming from the small children, the teenagers, the young adults, the older adults, the elders, and just the feeling of connection and being together, the feeling of community. And I think just a sense of learning, remembering, reflecting. So our elders reflecting and learning and remembering their childhood, their youth, but the children kind of being inspired and motivated by people that are older than them. And I think one of the quotes was about, we've got something in common now. This is it, this is the one. How important dance is for our community. I saw people from my community. I didn't know that they were in it, and suddenly they were with me. We now have something in common, even though we aren't the same age. And I saw recently 77 people on this stage in front of 600 people, and I saw each and every one overwhelmed with confidence, self-esteem, and just buzzing, I think was the word that they were all feeling coming off the stage, and feeling that they'd conquered something together. Because I do think that our community, our society can feel quite fragmented at times, and us and them, and we're this and they're that. But actually, a project like this can make you feel those boundaries aren't there, whether it's cultural boundaries or age boundaries, and that you are just united and you're brought together towards a common goal.
Amazing. But we certainly all take our hats off to you in terms of the organisation and the managing of such, never mind the artistic excellence, but the actual managing of all of those elements. I'll just give you an opportunity as we close up to tell us, are we allowed to say that which choreographer you're supposed to be working with? But certainly artistic excellence is a pillar of the work that you're doing as well. So just give us a few words on the importance of artistry.
Yeah, so over the last decade, we've been engaging with professional choreographers and companies, and Bradford has been named the UK City of Culture in 2025. So we took an opportunity to jump on this and think, what can we do that's really amazing, and who can we work with? And the last company we worked with was Matthew Bourne's New Adventures, which was for us, the biggest, most prestigious company that we'd worked with. And we thought, who can we go to next? Where can we go? So we've had a conversation with a certain South Asian choreographer, who is globally recognised. I don't know if I'm allowed to really tell you too much.
But that's really exciting.
And we are planning an intergenerational cross-community project for Bradford 2025, which will take place on the main stage at the Alhambra Theatre, which is probably Bradford's biggest, most beautiful theatre, 1,200-seater. And it is super exciting. So if you follow us, if you go on social media, you will find out quite soon who that certain choreographer may be.
But this really is our kind of closing thoughts. I was really interested in what Helen said to me about, because let's just say professional choreographers are really focusing on the precision of their work or their message and getting that across, and the challenges and the interest of working with such an intergenerational piece for a prestigious choreographer. And you said you had some really interesting things to say just about why is that interesting for an artist?
I thought this last night, as well as I watched New Zealand Dance Company. Just the conversation about anything can look good on a professional dancer. You can make anything look good. Whereas with non-dancers from different backgrounds, of different life experiences, different shapes and sizes and ages, you can't just put any movement on them and hope that it's going to work. So I think this is a big challenge for a choreographer who usually works with very technically able, trained bodies to come and work with our communities, along with all their baggage of different complex needs and trauma, and they're not going to rock up because they've got a childcare situation and they can't attend the dress rehearsal, and we're going to have to manage that. So it's all of those complex needs that we're going to throw into the mix, which is always a challenge.
So that's an inspirational challenge for an artist like that. Okay, Helen, thank you so much for being with us. First of all, a very big round of applause for Helen and her work. Mostly.
Thank you so much.
And,
thank you.
Please, if you're online with us and you've got questions for Helen, she'll be back in the panel at the end of this session. So thank you so much. And I invite the people that are here and at home just to take a couple of seconds stretch, because we're going across live to New York and joining colleagues of ours from Mark Morris Dance Group, who some of you will be aware of them for the Dance for PD program. So they're extremely well known internationally for the Dance for PD program. But we're going to be speaking with them, or they're going to be speaking with us today on the intergenerational and family initiatives that they also run within their broad educational program. So for those of you online, I believe that you can see them clearly, but we are going to have to watch a small screen as we introduce Sarah Marcus, who is the Director of Education, I'm sorry, Sarah, and Alex Cook and Pam Quinn, who are colleagues with her. Sarah, I will let you introduce them and their roles precisely. Is that fine for you as you take over from us? So did you do that stretch? I didn't see the stretch from people. So here, just that 30-second, we're all dancers. Big wide open. Get your endorphins going with wide stretches, and your risk-taking, that changes the endorphins with wide stretches. Wide positions. Fantastic. I'm going to go over to you if you want to say anything more.
Oh, I was just going to respond very quickly to the point that was raised here in face-to-face about why isn't this in public prescribing. There are different countries within the European Union that are busy with public prescribing. And when we are approaching this as a foundation, what we aspire to do is to help policymakers create white papers so that they can support the organizations and the groups and the artists and the practitioners who are actually working with the communities that are in such need of support, like Helen and the fabulous work that she's doing, as so many of you are. So with that, please, I'd like to throw it over to our colleagues in New York. Sarah, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you, Eldridge
Excellent.
and Claire. And can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all. Thank you to the Holland Dance Festival for welcoming us to this exciting and really interesting discussion around intergenerational projects. Before we begin, I would like to just have my colleagues introduce themselves. And again, I'm Sarah Marcus. I'm the Director of Education and Community Engagement at the Mark Morris Dance Group. I use she, her pronouns. And I will turn it over to my two colleagues. Go ahead, Alex, and then over to Pam.
Hi, all. My name is Alex Cook. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Youth and Family Programs Director for Mark Morris Dance Group. And I apologize for any background noise. I'm joining you from Gatwick Airport, so thank you for your understanding there. Passing it over to you, Pam.
Hi, I'm Pamela Quinn. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you for having us. Pleased to be here. I'm part of the Dance for PD program. I teach, I choreograph, and I have PD myself. So happy to be here.
Thank you.
Great. And I'm going to go ahead and just take this moment to share my screen so that the folks online can see. Oh, Eldridge, just so you know, I don't have that capability. So if you want me to share my PowerPoint, I will need that hosting ability. So I'll let that sort of work itself out. And actually just starting with Alex. So in our in Mark Morris Dance Group's community engagement programs, either Dance with MMDG or our Family Fun series, can you speak a little bit about the goals of these programs and what do you see as some of the benefits for our younger folks in the space dancing with older adults?
Yeah, some of you may be aware of the tagline for the dance group. It is dances for anybody. And we really take that as far as we can. The goal really of any of the programs at the Mark Morris Dance Center and in our community is to bring a sense of joy through movement. And we have 4 core values: access, community, artistic excellence, and creativity, that really drive all of our decision making when it comes to new programs or bringing something together. And so, you know, when, for example, we put together our Dance Center showcase, most of the programs at the Dance Center are not performance-based, they are process-based, with the exception of a couple of programs for really 10 to 18-year-olds. And so we have a Dance Center showcase at the end of the year, and the Dance for PD community is involved in that. And we really wanted to give an opportunity for students to delve into working intergenerationally. And, you know, I think both within that opportunity and our Family Fun programs, which are intergenerational dance classes, it gives everyone an opportunity to come together, experience the joy of movement, as I've mentioned earlier. Additionally, it really is a chance for our young people to see that, you know, we are living up to this value of dances for anybody, that they can dance their whole lives long. And, you know, if it's something that gives them joy, they should dance their whole lives long. It's really important for them to see that. And also the sorts of commitments that the older generation does bring into the room in terms of, you know, their rehearsal practice and showing up early, just things that translate into good life skills, I think, in general, are just some of the benefits.
Great. Thanks, Alex. And turning over to you, Pam, you know, as somebody who has created now several works, both at the dance group, but with other projects around within the dance industry, you know, what do you see both as both a goal when creating work in an intergenerational space, and then benefits specifically for younger folks?
Just let me interrupt, say PD stands for Parkinson's disease, for those who might not be aware of it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think one thing that working with intergenerational groups, it takes away the stereotypes of old people can't move, or people with a disease or a disability can't perform. And it sort of brushes those aside, and it allows us to get to know each other as people rather than as a category. So it sort of breaks that down, and that's very useful because in society, we're all segregated. You know, kids are in school or in college, and old people are at a home or some facility, and we don't have a chance to mix or to interact. Like in older times when you had a family with different generations that all lived together, that doesn't happen anymore, or not a lot. And so this gives us a chance to mingle and exchange ideas. And the young people bring vitality to the older people, and the older people bring wiseness to the younger people. And it's just a nice exchange.
Yeah, and before we show a little clip from a work that you choreographed with our, we have a student company, ages 10 to 18, along with our Dance for Parkinson's Disease participants. You know, one of the things that we had talked about was, you know, you choreographed during COVID, right? And given that older adults, and particularly those with Parkinson's disease, have a higher risk, and the issues, the challenges with working in that space. How did you manage that challenge, and how did it change your process?
Well, it's difficult because, as you said, the older people were very brave to come, even though we were wearing masks. Still, just the getting to the studio is a process, and usually I try to break the ice by having some kind of physical contact, either holding hands, going across the floor, or one person leaning into the other, a give and take of weight or something. But with COVID, I couldn't do that. So I've had to figure out some way to have them connect, but not through movement. So that could be creatively in terms of coming up with ideas together, or finding ways to like use a prop together so that you're not touching, but you're coordinated in terms of rhythm. But one thing that happens in the choreographic process is whenever you have a limitation, it flowers into a creative situation. Limitations really provide creative solutions, and they force you to go a place you haven't been before because you have no choice. So in this instance, it allowed me to, if I use props, which I do frequently with elderly people, you're not talking about steps or counting or something. Usually the prop tells you what kind of movement you're going to do. If you have a tube, you're going to lift it up, or you're going to twirl it, or you're going to pretend it's a cane or whatever. And so the prop can dictate the movement, and it doesn't have to be a step or something you have to count, or something that older people might not be aware of, or might not be very good at. And I think in the clip you're going to show it involves a parachute, and that's something in action. Lifting and building a parachute is something everyone can do.
Great. All right. So, well, thank you for that intro. We are going to now watch a clip from Pam's piece that was choreographed on the student company and the Dance for Parkinson's program participants from our last year. Was it last spring, or was it the spring before? Now I'm forgetting. I'm sorry.
Last spring.
Yeah, last spring it was. Dance Center Showcase. So bear with me. I'm going to go ahead and do this. And here we go.
As this was during COVID, that's part of why you see other bodies on the floor.
Yeah.
These are sheets that we're using. One little boy who saw it said, "Well, we thought they were clouds." Which is great. This is, I asked each group to come up with their own ideas about how to use the sheets. So you see some jump rope happening. You see a swing happening in the lower left. You see a baby being passed around in the upper left. And someone rolling in the There is music, but it's okay, there's not. And then everybody goes to sleep. Now the people walking around are unable to get down to the ground, but I just use that as a way to let them walk, and that gives you different information. So you have to use whatever limitation people have to try to.
Great. So I'm sorry that I think the folks over at in space hopefully heard the music. I'm not sure if they did. I played it, but so sorry about that if that didn't come across. But yes, I think we get with what Pam is speaking to about the use of the props, the creating interdependence, utilizing physical cues while managing COVID and the challenges there came across beautifully in that section of the piece. Did you want to add anything more, Pam?
Yes, I would like to say that the most difficult thing as a choreographer is figuring out how to communicate your own aesthetic. And because people who are seniors, whether they have a disability or not, are limited in what they can do. And so you need to find something that interests you, but that's simple. And that's hard to do. And also you want to involve them in the process of making up movement, but then if they make up something you don't like, you don't want to reject them. And so you're put in this quandary about how to deal with that. And you need to give them very specific directions that will elicit what you want and stay away from what you don't want. So that you need to be articulate about that as a way to preserve their own sense of value, and you still get what you want artistically. And so if you can say, well, let's just change this a little bit this way or that way, so that you can still maintain their contribution, but have it work for you too. That's what's really hard.
Got it. Thanks, Pam. Alex, when you hear Pam speaking about these approaches and methodologies, what resonates with you as an educator?
I mean, I think, what it makes me think of is a lot of what I talk about with our teaching artist training program trainees, who are all folks learning to be teachers, about what makes really excellent teaching practice. And so what Pam is speaking to is when you're in an intergenerational space, or if you're working, with folks who are older adults, this is something that you need to do because of certain realities about their movement practice. But ultimately, those are just really great skills for any teacher to have under their belt, and any artistic practice to have, is this communication, this understanding of how to adapt movement to any dancer's body. And I think what's beneficial for our young people is that this specificity that Pam is referencing in terms of aesthetic value is something that they can learn a lot about from an artistic perspective of, you know, how do you communicate what it is that you're looking for, and as an artist, no matter what context that you're working within.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think what that speaks to specifically is that no matter what stage in life you are at, there's more common ground than not, and shared experiences create that sense of even, you know, of more common ground, of understanding of the symbiotic relationship that can exist.
You know, sorry, Sarah, just really quickly. And I should say something that, you know, I was thinking about as well is the experience of the student company dancers working with the Dance for PD community really developed. I think Helen was also speaking about this earlier, you know, this community between all of these folks. And, you know, Pam was referencing this, where it's like that community otherwise wouldn't be developed within their day to day. So it was really beautiful to see.
And you know, something that I think all three of us witnessed over the last few years of working together and creating these intergenerational performing opportunities. But did either of you, or in whichever space, but particularly the performance space, experience any resistance from either, you know, the older adult community or the children or the youth? And how did you manage?
I didn't experience resistance. I experienced shyness to that you had to find a way to break the ice initially to get them connected in some way. I usually start off with playing a game, not a competitive game, but some fun game that you know makes mix people. But there was something else I was going to say. Oh yeah, I just finished a project where I had a lot of trouble recruiting people for PD because I think they were their class didn't take place in an artistic context like the Mark Morse studio, so they weren't used to that, and being part of an art project was not something that they knew anything about or were, and no one was interested, and I had to say to them, you know, this is something that people have done before and that have meant so much to them. I can't tell you how much it has. And so that's a lot of education has to go on as well to let people know that it's going to be okay. And, you know, people with Parkinson's tend to have a lot of anxiety, and that's something that you have to handle as well. So.
And how about you, Alex? Any pushback?
Yeah. I think initially the, you know, main thing I heard from some of our student company dancers, particularly, you know, they're in a middle school developmental place of like, they want to make sure that they're not being judged by their peers, which is what they think is happening 100% of the time. And I think, you know, there was some feeling around like, oh, this isn't going to be as virtuosic as I want it to be, or as some of the other pieces that I've been a part of. And I think they found over time that that was not true, first and foremost, but also that they really came to value the relationships that they were building in the studio, which is ultimately, you know, going back to the goals that I was referencing at the top of this chat, what we want them to understand about what dance can do for them is that it's a community relationship building opportunity. And, you know, they get to move and perform along the way.
Great, thank you. And then in terms of our, just, you know, circling back to our ongoing programming, our intergenerational programming at the Dance Center, that's either, you know, we do outdoor classes on the plaza for anyone to join. Dance with MMDG is a dancer from the company, teaches intergenerational dance class that focuses on a particular piece of Mark Boris's, and or family fun, right, which brings the sort of like a different style of dance that we don't typically offer at the dance center, or in honor of a certain observance or a holiday, and bringing the whole family in to enjoy that. Tell me a little bit about just, not obviously not resistance, but like, tell me a little bit about how that's developing and how that informs the rest of the programming.
Yeah, and it also makes me think of the We Dance program, which goes, for now, we've actually started a We Dance postpartum class. So we're doing, newborns with caregivers all the way through age 4 in that class. And, I think the biggest thing, this makes me think of, again, something Helen was referencing earlier, in terms of logistics, and really, when developing programs like this, thinking about what do people need and access points. So that is something as large as, when we're doing the Dance Center Showcase, like, hey, how are we going to feed people in the middle of the day? We had like 84 cast members, and that did not include staff and crew. As something that seems as kind of ancillary as what time of day is this class going to take place, or how long is this class going to be? What sort of space is it happening in? Which of course we should be doing with all of our programming, but just becomes, you're starting to think about really every layer of accessibility. So when people arrive at the space, when they're going from the front desk to the studio, what sorts of spaces are available for them? Is there, for example, I'm thinking about in our adaptive dance classes, for children who have a disability that families opt into, we permit families to go into the space if they would like to. Right. And, is there a space for those students to go and like take a break, and have, a tactile moment if they need it? So just really examining it, I think, from a 360-degree focus to ensure that, you've really thought about making the experience not just great within the studio, but overall, just enjoyable, and people feeling as though their needs are being met from the moment that they arrive at the space.
Yeah. Great. Well, I think that is all the time, Eldridge and Claire, I think we have for this part of the conversation. I don't know if there's any other follow-up, but I just want to say thank you to both Alex and Pam for taking the time out on a Saturday to talk with us about this. So turning it over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah, Alex, and Pam, for that. Applause here. Be silent applause from our online followers, so apologies for that. And Sarah, you're staying with us, and Pam and Alex as well, for our now panel discussion. We hope we've got some questions coming from the chat and from yourselves here, because we have all of our wonderful presenters joining us on stage. Just give us a moment or two to organise ourselves here. Yes, we're in physical space, not virtual space, so we need... So Andrea, Yolanda, Helen... Oh, we're losing one of our panel members who's running away. Where would shall I move? I'm in one of the special armchairs. I can go anywhere.
Here we go.
I'll bring some more microphones across.
I'll pass here a microphone. Here we go.
Would
you like that?
Thank you. There's another one on the stand. Okay, we'll share. I'll sit back. I hope we have questions.
Here we go.
I'll just keep speaking as we say. Sarah and Pam and Alex, that was amazing, the sharing that you were doing. Thank you so much of the choreographic work and also of the families' work, and how you get so many people together as well. Just like Helen, I'm amazed at how you managed to get so many people in the studio and dancing together. Just bravo from us.
Yes, well done. And if there are any questions in the audience, please. Yes, thank you.
We have a question straight off, but any of us.
Yeah, so it's a very specific question, but it's about the young people who were kind of part of a process, but then weren't able to perform due to a religious and cultural kind of barrier, in this case, to dancing. Because we have the same thing happen as well in London, and I just wondered, were you able to keep in touch with them once they didn't perform? What happened, you know? Like, I was curious what you guys did.
Well, I think that a lot of our work examines the legacy of everything that we do. So we try not to parachute into places. We try not to just do a wonderful project and then say, bye then, that was nice. So we have a lot of progression route companies that people can join if they choose to. So we're always thinking about what next. But in terms of groups that kind of come to a sudden end because of something like that, which was quite unexpected, and we were thinking the whole time they're in it, they're talking about their costumes and everything, and then suddenly, oh no, we're not allowed. We have since been back to that women's centre and delivered dance sessions just for them. So we've found a way to keep in touch. We're a very tiny team of 5 people, so it's ridiculous when you think about how many people we bring together and what we do. So sometimes there are natural endings to things, but with that particular group, we did go back and we did do some more dance sessions because they actually enjoyed the process of it. They enjoyed just the act of dancing, as we've been talking a lot about today. So yeah, we try to think about legacy and progression as much as possible.
Yeah, I think actually it might be worth to throw that over to our colleagues across the sea, because you also talked about process as opposed to an end result. And most of the time when we think of dance, we think of actually getting to a performance or perhaps some kind of show moment. How do you find that in the motivation or in the process of the people in the studio?
Well, I think that,
yeah. Please go ahead,
I think
Pam.
that you have to know from the outset, who are you doing this for? Is it for the people who are in the class? Is it for the choreographer? So whose needs are you addressing? If you're focusing on process, then you may involve them a lot more. If you're focusing on realizing an idea that you have choreographically, then you may use them more as performers, but not as creators as much. So you have to be clear about who is this for and what is the context of it? Should it be a studio showing or should it be a full-blown performance? I mean, I've seen things that are in a performance venue that shouldn't be in a performance venue. And then they come off horribly because they're pretentious or something. And then other things that are really good that are just shown in a studio that merit a performance. So you have to know what your context is, what your goal is, and who you're doing it for.
Thank you. Alex?
Yeah, just in support of what Pam was saying, I think what is helpful for us in terms of the school at the dance centers, we're very clear with families when they are enrolling their children that there is no performance. We do have family and friends days where we invite families into the studio to watch class. But if students opt to participate as part of the student company program, they know that there is a performance associated with that. So I think it's really about building a culture of understanding that performance is something that you opt into. And to, Pam's point, just a clarity around that so that students know what they're getting themselves into.
Thank you. Claire?
Well, I'd like to throw a question actually to all of our participants, if you don't mind, which is, I'm always the first person to be discussing, is this just a process or is there a product, is there an outcome? but hearing more and more evidence around the importance of performance and what that brings in addition to the process. And I just wondered if different members of our panel here and panel across the seas might just add something in what they have experienced or observe as the benefits of actually going for that product, for the performance. Andrea, do you want to start?
No, I don't know if I can clearly answer the questions, but what I would like to add is, at least what we try to do is going out of the theater, out of the black box. So there is also another way to look at things. And we try also that it's more that everyone is involved. Also the spectator or the public, which will come, is in the end also involved. And we try to really bring them on stage as well. So so we create everything together. So the public is also involved, and not only the people we work with. So it gets really a party.
A party.
Yeah, interaction, but also a party that we celebrate all together, which I think it's very important. So we went also to churches to revitalize the churches also in another way. So not in a religion way, but to celebrate inside this kind of space as well, or community centers where other people can also come. They're more used to come and public, not to the theater, because they might be not knowing the way to it. So it's a step.
Making it feel accessible as well, but so importance of performance.
Yeah, well, maybe yesterday it was a topic as well. Maybe Eileen, would you like to repeat what we discussed yesterday for your company? What's the issue about performing?
Oh yeah, and I have two thoughts actually. Yeah, so my name's Elaine Foley, and I work as the projects manager at Sadler's Wells Theatre in London, and I run a company called Company of Elders, and it's a group of 22 dancers, 60 to 80. And it's been running for 35 years. But anyways, I haven't been around that long I have been around 35 years, but not with Company of Elders. Anyways, I think about this a lot, this question about performance. And I'm so interested in the dancers not feeling stressed, because I want dance to be fun. But actually, I think you need a little bit of stress, because then you go through something together. Everybody together feels they've broken through a barrier that they haven't, if you're only ever comfortable, you don't grow. So I think there's something about that. But then the other thing we talked about, I think yesterday, is then having that moment to celebrate. Is it about the party? Having a party at the end, or making sure to celebrate that moment that you have come through something a little difficult and had to work together to get to the other side? Is that maybe something like that?
Yeah,
you might be thinking of something else.
I think, but all is it working? Yeah, does it work? Yeah. Also, the guidance for the people who are doing the presentation, that you have really an eye for that part of being the performer, not only a dancer, but really performer. And you told us yesterday that it's really important to have an eye for that as well. So to help the performer to be okay on stage, or even more, to be able to celebrate what you just said. So, and that's, for some dancers, it's not that obvious that it's gonna happen during the rehearsal process, even though they might know they're going to be on stage, especially for people who haven't done that so many times. But I know professional dancers who are really nervous before they go on stage, even if they've done so many performances. So, but especially with the elderly and the amateur dancers, I think it's really important. I have it in my studio. If I work with, well, what I already said, we work with the small children up till 75 on stage, and well, it's really important to guide them and not just to throw them on stage. And you know the sequence. It's not only about the sequence. It's about a lot more. Yeah.
So if I can just recap, there are several elements that we've talked about here. One of them being who and for what. Another one is managing expectations. Another one is the celebration of what you're doing and the way that you guide people, you facilitate their work. There's also this idea of, I think we've talked earlier before on being online about creating secure and safe spaces. And that's very important when we consider stretching people out of their comfort zone. So I think everybody has a right to be safe and secure, and sometimes that becomes a sort of what we would call a secondary win, which is your comfort zone. And you can hang in your comfort zone. But if you stretch your comfort zone, which is something that we do as dancers anyway, if you can stretch that space, then you can realize, oh, you know, I can go somewhere else that I hadn't realized at that moment that I could do. So perhaps that's something that we can think of in terms of performances or going out of the black box so that it's not a performance, but it could be an open rehearsal. And allowing people to engage in that sort of what would be termed ACU stress, positive stress, as opposed to trapping them into distress, which would be a negative stress.
Can I just add one thing to the performance aspect? Sorry. I'm just thinking
Sarah.
about people who are marginalised and who are not usually perceived as capable of being on a professional stage. And a lot of the people that we engage with are people who've been told you can't and you mustn't and you shouldn't and you won't. And so the standards have been set, the bar has been set very low. And that's what they become quite familiar with. So when you say you're going to perform at the end of this in front of 600 people at St. George's Hall, I think it's really important for actually fundamentally changing people's lives and changing the stereotypes and changing the narrative in what they think their life is going to be. So by placing them in a performance, professional theatre kind of situation can actually be quite transformative. So it's a crucial part of the process.
Before we go to Sarah, I think this is really important what you said. At the same time, I'm curious, how do you set that? You have to preset that in a way, right? It's like Claire was speaking about the use of language in a way that is creating a positive. So there must be a preset there. What's the preset before you say, guys, you're going to be in front of 600 people doing something you've never done before on stage with lights and makeup. Good luck. I mean, what do you do before you do that?
Oh, I tell them not to worry about that. I don't think about that right now. Inside my head, I'm thinking about that. But I think it's about, again, that what we've talked about a lot today, what you've referred to as being present.
Yeah.
So we're just here now. Let's just focus on today.
Right.
It's our jobs to worry about, 6 months' time or 6 weeks' time or whatever. So it's very much kind of how you balance that between we're here, we're now, let's work on this today, and gradually building up to that point.
And what Helen is saying is enhancing expectancies.
Yes.
Yeah,
so it's the expectation that you have of yourself being promoted by the way people address you and talk to you and what they expect from you.
Let's
Sarah.
go to Sarah.
Sure, thanks. I just wanted to add on sort of, Eldridge, to your list of, sort of performance versus process and sort of the important things we want to keep in mind. I think, certainly over here in the States, dance as life, dance as culture, dance as a shared family experience, dance as intergenerational has been othered for forever. Dance is not something, that's something that we as a society have to work on to see as that's just part of what we do together, to live life, to celebrate all the things you talk about, which is what I think we're trying to sort of, tackle and focus and emphasize on, and emphasize in our youth and family programming, so that so that it's just part of the process, it's part of being a part of our community. So that by the time you get to this option of, do you want a performance? Do you want to opt into this performance? That it's not such a stark contrast to any other experience and or so scary or I don't do that, especially in some of the folks that we work with in our, our older adult programming and even in our Dancer PD program. Is a resistance to even participate because you're not a dancer. And I think that's what we're trying to sort of debunk is that everybody's a dancer. You know, that you're not a dancer. Everybody is a dancer, and that I think that's where the process, I think, is really important for me and for us.
Excellent. We'll go to Claire and then we'll come to Andrea. Thank you, Sarah.
I just want to take us back to, we were talking earlier, I think before people joined us online, about pedagogic skills, so teaching skills and everything. And really that moment of transition between when somebody is just dancing for themselves or feeling the movement for themselves, and then suddenly having to make the leap between what does that look like if somebody's actually my spectator, and how do I organize myself in space in relation to a spectator, cognitively is quite a big change and development that actually has to happen. I'm just making us conscious of that. So there's something as an individual who's experiencing dance who has to then learn a whole new skill set in terms of understanding how sculpturally or emotionally my movement is interpreted with spectators from the outside. So that's it's a theme. I'm going to speak on behalf of Pam now, but knowing the Dance for PD program, actually performing and being seen is a through thread that they have throughout the classes and the programming, even if somebody's not required to perform. So it's another cognitive skill that we're requiring of dancers that's beyond dancing.
Thank you, Claire. Andrea, would you like to?
Yeah, just two little points where we found out is that we try to, through improvisation, to figure out with the participants we have, to figure out what is their quality, what is their beauty, what do they, when they shine, and we figure out that in improvisation, like we dance with them, like professional dancers are working then with the amateurs, and we can figure out like this in a duet or in a discussion, a physical discussion, what can come out, and which we found is valuable to let these dancers shine. And another point, which sometimes we have to be also taking care of, that when they get too good or when they started to be thinking of, oh, now I have to act, or I don't know if you also experienced that suddenly now it's the presentation coming, and then they overact somehow. Yes. Although the naturalness is so beautiful, or what we like to bring out, or us as choreographer. So for us it was always this challenge also, not the overacting. How can we bring it back to naturalness? And so there are so ranges, yeah, I feel.
I think there is a connection there with what Sarah was talking about. We're almost conditioned and preconceived ideas of what dance is, and whether it's for us or not for us. And actually, you know, it's something that comes back to why we chose From Young to Wise. This idea of learning from others to be yourself is something that we do actually have to struggle with. And sometimes older people tend to just let that go and just do their thing, which I think is so beautiful about watching older dancers as a professional dancer. I'm going to have to close this off now because time is running out. I'd just like to have a quick word from all of our panelists, if there's something they'd like to leave our audience with. Perhaps we can start with Pam.
I'd just like to say that the process of performing instills people with a lot more confidence at both, whatever age you are. That you're on a stage, you're exposing yourself to other people, you're trying out a new skill, and you achieve something. You've really achieved a purpose, and that's a wonderful feeling for everyone.
Thank you, Pam. Alex, would you like to just leave us with a final closing word?
Sure. Thanks so much for inviting us. I think something that was occurring to me during that discussion is if we're being truly culturally responsive in our teaching practice, and we have, folks who are maybe not permitted to perform for some reason, I think that's where the creativity in our artistry as teachers can really come out, for us to find those experiences that are a part of the process that maybe mimic performance in some ways, that give folks the chance to develop those skills that we've all been talking about that are so beneficial. So, I'm just so thankful that people are engaging in this work, because I think it only means good things for the future of dance, but also the future of the world.
Thank you, Alex. Sarah?
Yeah, I feel similar. I think that dance can be a bridge for creating, common ground, shared experiences, understanding, emotional, social intelligence from a young age. And I think who better to learn that from than folks who've had lived experiences for years. And I think there's so much that as a field, as an industry, and as a society that we can learn from these kinds of experiences. So agreed, totally grateful for the folks who are doing this work around the world. And it inspires me and provides hope. So thank you for providing the space to even have the conversation around it.
And thank you for joining us. And here in the room, Andrea, would you like to give us a closing word?
Yeah, I try. I agree with what was just said, and I had it in my mind as well, what I wanted to share with you, because we are often, or us, Muziektheater Pra, we are so much in our own bubble and alone that when I'm now here with you all and the last days at the Holland Festival, it's reinforcing, and that doet goed.
It does you good.
That does you good.
Thank you. Yolanda?
Yeah, well, I'm very pleased to have you here, and it was very inspirational. And I will continue my work anyways, so, and I really love it. And it's good to share all the experiences among us, and even from the USA. So thank you very, very, very much. And I know Sarah and Claire would like to say something, yeah. And I would like Eldridge to thank you for moderating this afternoon. And also thank you to the productional and technical crew. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Helen. Helen.
I think it's just important to keep pushing boundaries and challenging ourselves as artists, as companies, as organisations, and as a sector, as an industry, to never underestimate who can dance, where they can dance, what they can dance, and just to keep pushing the ambitions of all of us.
Fantastic. Claire, I'm not going to go straight to you because you're going to dance us out. I'm just going to say something. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak and to meet all of you, our audience, the people online, and our wonderful panel. In choosing this word wise, comes back to something that Sarah was saying about othering. When you define the word wise, what you're actually saying is, what do we choose to support? What do we choose to do because it embodies us and it brings us something extra? And I think that is what wise is. We go from being young, naive, nascent, not knowing, to knowing. And if we can't, as you said, if we can't embrace that, if we can't come together with that, as our panel has said, then we're leaving it on the table, and that is such a shame. So thank you all for joining us. Claire, will you dance us out?
I am going to dance us out, but we have to be articulate about what we do as well. So that's always my job, about making sure it's evidenced too, and that we can support why we do what we do. Nevertheless, just a light moment so that we do what we do. I invite you either here to find a space that you can move in. This is just a quick dance out that you can do from your seat if you prefer to join it. No, you can't. You can't do it from your. You can do it from the podium. You can do it from your seat. We will need music for this if our technical team are still there. Up-la. And I'm going to use, see if I can see, I hope you'll dance with us, even in Gatwick Airport, maybe, in spirit. Make sure you've got a little bit of space there. We need to know about 3 things to do this. I just tried to choose some universal images, and these are images that came from, yeah, I know, I'm starting already. These are images that came from my older adult dancers when we tried to look at the role of a woman. And the role of the woman is stuck inside the washing machine. So, yeah, that's where we are. So you need to know a few different movements and then we can get boogieing. The first one is when you switch it on. And that looks a bit like rapping.
Do we have any music?
Yeah, we do. Well, shouldn't have it yet because it's a bit too loud, all right? So you'll need to do this kind of soggy action. Rapping like that. Good. Then you need to do some contrasting movements. So you've got to push against the drum and you've got to tie yourself in a knot. And push against the drum and tie yourself in a knot. Super. Then we're going to go for a cycle. Mind the cups, or if you're on the seat, just take a cycle. And we're going to scream into the glass. Exactly, and we'll do that on 8 counts. I think that's all we need to know. We'll then go for a freestyle tumble dry afterwards, but I'll tell us when we do that. Can we have a wee bit of music so you can do that? So we're going to hang loose first of all, if we can, when we can hear our music. It's the track number 4. 4. Yes, we nearly got the wrong music there. All right, so we just have our machine on. Yeah, nice and loud for those people at home as well. You've got to get soggy wet. I've only got one hand to do, so we can see you all watching us from New York, so you need to at least pretend you're doing it. Everybody good? Did you get wet through yet? Super. I don't know if I can do this with only one hand. All right, here we go. We're going to press against the drum. Ready? Off we go. And press. We're going to press and tie in a knot. And push. And make a knot of the clothes. Push. Good, in your own ways. We've got lots of expressive stuff happening here. We're going for a cycle in a minute. Right. Push. Okay, here comes the cycle. We've got 8 counts. Screaming on 8. Go. Going each direction, please. Last tune. Great. I'd like you to freestyle mix with the other clothes. It's a coloured wash, so don't worry about mixing colours. Mixing colours. This really does come from my older adult group. I think this is our dance out here. Mixing colours. You might like to take your camera over to the colour mixing that's happening over there. All right, it's getting quite wild. It's a six over there. Thank you, yes. Okay, the machine is on pause. That means the soggy wet moment where it does all of this kind of thing. We're going to go for one last round of all of that, and then that's plenty of dance for today. So shaking out, ready for the press and the knots. 5, 6, here we go, press the drum, and press, and a tight knot, and press, and a tight knot. Oh, 10, and a tight knot. any way you like. We're dancing out. This is the Dance and Creative Wellness Foundation mixing and leaving you for today. Thank you so much for joining us online. Thank you, Pam, for bringing out your cloth out there.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you all. Thank you very much. And that's a wrap.
That is a wrap.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And for everybody who's here and even online, we will try to figure out what we can share. Maybe sending it by email. And of course, the videos we could not watch because of the time, we can send them to everybody.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Have a good trip home. Some people will stay here for the performance tonight. We have a Good Old Times production in Zaal 2 here in the theater at 7. And hope to see you again. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Let's all wave at the people at home as well. And thank you so much, Sarah and Pam. Thank you for joining us. That was fantastic to hear from you as well.
Thank you. Great. Well done. Thank you all very much for attending. Yeah.
It's a